Good evening. Welcome to the Big Story. I'm Regina Lay.
I'm Gretchen Ho.
And I'm Shawn Yao.
Tonight's big stories. President Bongbong Marcos's trust rating slightly declined in the third quarter, while that of Vice President Sara Duterte saw a significant drop, as per Okta Research's latest numbers.
Typhoon Leon, international name Comelec, veers away from the Philippines and slams into Taiwan's east coast. The island's authorities say it is the strongest storm to hit them in 30 years.
And more than a dozen Chinese nationals allegedly involved in cyber scamming were arrested at a raid in Parañaque as authorities go after the Pogo splinter groups.
Another quarter, another survey. Okta Research's latest one shows a drop in the trust and performance ratings of the country's top two leaders, but more so in the numbers of Vice President Sara Duterte. Let's break it down. So in Okta's third quarter data, President Bongbong Marcos's trust score slipped 2 points to 69 from 71%, which Okta says is within the margin of error, while Duterte's trust rating dropped to 59% from the 65% that she garnered in Q2. That is a 6 percentage point drop, which Okta considers a significant one given that it surpassed the poll's margin of error of plus minus 3%.
When it comes to performance satisfaction rating, the president's number was statistically unchanged on the national level at 66%, while the vice president's dropped from 60% in July to 52% in September, which is an erosion of 8 points. In an interview with our sister program Storycon, Okta President Ranjit Rai said the consistent decline in Sara's numbers over the last 2 quarters can now be called a trend.
For the first time in almost since the inception of the administration, the president has higher trust and approval ratings than the vice president. It should be significant to the margin of error. So in this case, for the last 2 quarters, it's been more than 3 percentage point drops. So 5 percentage point is considered significant sa Okta given the 1,200 sample size. So this is how this is where we're coming from when we say there is a significant drop.
Indeed, the trust ratings for the vice president have been on the decline since March 2023, as per Okta's data. From a high of 87% in March of last year, her trust numbers kept declining by 3 to 5 points each time, as you can see now on the graph, with the biggest drop occurring between December last year to March of this year. She lost 9 points in that time. And now Duterte's trust ratings sit at 59%. The only region holding up her numbers is not surprisingly rather, is Mindanao, which gave her a 95% trust rating for the second quarter.
Meanwhile, the leaders of Congress continue to enjoy high ratings among the majority on balance. This quarter, Senate President Cheese Escudero's trust score came in at 67%, while House Speaker Martin Romualdez scored 61%. Performance-wise, 65% of respondents said that they were satisfied with Escudero's work, while 62% expressed satisfaction with Romualdez. Note that Okta's survey was conducted between September 4 and 7. That was way before Sara's explosive press conference on October 18. That's also when she went full throttle on her criticism of the Marcoses, infamously saying that she threatened to dig up Marcos Sr.'s remains and throw them out to the West Philippine Sea. The Okta survey conducted among 1,200 or 1,200 respondents also came before another event, that of former President Duterte testifying at the Senate's drug war probe on October 28. It is not yet clear how or if that might impact next quarter's numbers.
Let's try to make sense of these numbers. For that, we have to call in Professor Guido David, Okta Research Fellow. Good evening, Professor. Good to see you again.
Hi, good evening, and good to see you again, ladies, Gretchen, Regina, and Shawn.
First things first, before we get accused of politicizing this, can you tell us who commissioned this survey?
The survey is part of our non-commissioned quarterly Okta Research Tugon ng Masa survey So we conduct it every quarter. It's a nationwide face-to-face survey with 1,200 respondents. So the margin of error is plus minus 3%.
Okay, so this is non-commissioned, not commissioned by any political party or group. Uh, the big story this time around seems to be, well, the fact that Vice President Sara Duterte's trust and performance ratings have been on the decline. We heard from your colleague, Professor Ranjit Rai, who says that this is now a trend. What do you think?
Well, if we're going by the previous 2 quarters, we could definitely call it a trend. But the trust and performance ratings are very dynamic, and they can change at any time. So, what I mean to say is, and I'm not making any corrections to what my colleague said, but I just want to make it clear that trends can also change directions, and this can happen depending on what the personality does. Sometimes they might do something that's approved by the public, and then that could maybe earn them better trust numbers. Of course, at this time, this is what we're seeing over the previous quarters, and this was conducted September 4 to 7, even before these events that were mentioned in the headline. I think around this time in early September, we were having these Senate and Quadcom hearings on the budget. So I think the numbers may have been affected by these hearings that we had in early September.
Okay, your standard deviation is a plus or minus 3%. I remember in the previous edition of this survey, after the second quarter, there were already some declines, but it was still within the margin of error and therefore quite, quote unquote, unremarkable. Can you explain to us the technicalities, Guido, behind this plus or minus 3% margin of error that you have, or some people would call the beta or the deviation? And is that also computed with the amount of people that you surveyed, which in this case is 1,200?
That's definitely very correct, Shawn. So the margin of error, it depends on the sampling and the number of respondents. So if we increase the number of respondents, let's say to 2,400, we might be able to decrease the margin of, we would be able to decrease the margin of error to down to about 2%, which would mean, that the results would be more reflective of the population response. You did mention that the decrease in the previous quarter was within the margin of error. And right now, even though we see a dip in the numbers of the president and maybe the House Speaker, these are within the margin of error of 3%. Unfortunately, for the Vice President, her numbers dipped below the 3% margin of error. So for trust, it went down from 65 to 59, and for her performance, it actually went down from 60 to 52. So that's an 8-point decrease. Although, as you mentioned, her numbers remain stable, or she remains popular in the Mindanao area and partly in Visayas area. We know which parts of Visayas that would be, but her numbers have been affected in NCR and Balance Luzon, and that's where she's been seeing most of her decrease in trust and performance.
Guido, apart from the Senate and Quadcom hearings, what else did happen between the period of September 4 to 7 or in the third quarter that could have possibly affected or caused that significant drop?
Well, it was mostly that, and there were already significant, a significant divide between, the two camps, even by September. I mean, it happened even way before then. We remember that during the SONA, and in fact, our previous quarter survey did not capture the effects of SONA. Wherein the Vice President decided not to attend the SONA and made some remarks about that. So this is actually the quarter that reflects, you could say, the effects of her not participating in the SONA, because We had our previous survey around June, and that was before. So those were some of the events that may have affected the response of the respondents.
The souring of the relationship between the president and the vice president um, happened during that time, correct? And Professor Ranjit Rai a while ago said that when there are 2 consecutive months where you see a significant drop, that represents a trend. But as reflected in our statistics and numbers a while ago, the vice president's numbers have been dropping since the 87% level, that high in March of last year. Hasn't this been going on for quite a long time already?
Actually, it has been going on, and I think from what I heard of my colleague, what he said, and I just want to clarify it, I think he did mention that it's been 2 quarters wherein the president has had higher trust and performance ratings compared to the vice president. So, but you're absolutely correct. The numbers have been declining since 2022, since when we first started tracking the trust and performance of the president and the vice president. The president's numbers saw some decline from 2022, but there was some bounce back, and it's remained quite stable, at least over the past few quarters that we've tracked it. But for the vice president, we've seen a decline somewhat, and you can see that in the graph there, that the decline is somewhat consistent, and you could probably call it a trend at that.
Okay, you know what actually jumped out at me is the fact that I believe this is the first time when Sara, surveyed lower than the president in terms of trust, in terms of performance.
No, it's
in
it was
terms
also
of
in the
trust.
past 2 quarters. Oh.
That he was,
She had started surveying lower
Lower.
already.
but now it's now significant, right? It's the
enough.
first time that it's significant. 6 percentage points down, 8 percentage points down for performance. Could we say that there is a specific tipping point when you look at the line graph? Like, at which point did it really start to go south for the vice president?
Well, and you're correct there that even though she tracked lower than the president in the previous quarter, they were still relatively close. I mean, within the margin of error, at least in terms of maybe trust. But probably the tipping point occurred about early this year, I believe, and that's when her numbers decreased below the 70s level down to about the 60s. But again, of course, like I said, trends are not necessarily permanent, and there could be some things that they could do to raise their trust and performance or approval ratings again. But we'll have to see how that transpires within the next quarters.
But actually, what's further to Shawn's point, 59% is dangerously close to 50% now. And once it goes under 50%, we can no longer say majority of Filipinos trust the vice president, right? What do you think? Is it heading in that direction?
Well, her performance is already down to 52, so yes, it's still slightly in the majority. And of course, if we compare those who trust her versus those who do not trust her, you could say that more people trust her compared to those who do not trust her, because there's always going to be a number of respondents who refuse to answer the question or who will say no comment. But yeah, I mean, dipping below 50 is, it's not really a good sign. And if comparing it, let's say, to U.S. Approval ratings, which I also tracked and monitor, when when the disapproval is above 50, that's usually very dangerous for a sitting president, because that means majority of the people do not approve of the direction. But and going back to the point, it is, of course, it should also be noted that the vice president is currently not directly part of the administration, because she's distanced herself from that. So comparing her to the president would be like apples to oranges at
Yeah.
this time, because
Yeah.
she's not really part of the administration, while the president is part of the administration, and he's, steering the direction of the administration. So his approval ratings will sort of reflect the performance of the administration, whereas the president does not.
Does it say that kahit mag-aaway itong presidente at vice president, na ayaw ng mga Pilipino na hindi nagkakasundo when it comes to governance? Because a while ago I was listening to Professor Ranjit, and he was saying that there's a growing preference amongst Filipinos for candidates who don't
Espouse
participate in negative
unity?
politics, yung hindi sinisiraan yung ibang kandidato at talagang nagtatrabaho na lang.
Moreover, this is completely in contrast to what they promised, which is unity, right? And then now, clearly, that's a thing of the past. So, do we see these reflected in the numbers, like definitively?
Definitely. I agree with all that you said, Shawn and Gretchen and Regina, that the Filipinos prefer candidates or politicians or government officials who just focus on the work. And right now we have challenges, and we can't deny that. I mean, we're facing some challenges as far as inflation, food security, public health, and a lot of that. And the Filipinos would rather that those in charge just focus on these challenges rather than having arguments or fights. And how do we know that? Because at the start of of their terms in 2022, after May 2022, both of the president and the vice president enjoyed high trust and performance ratings above 80%, and both of them have seen a consistent or I would say steady, but both of them have seen a decline in their trust and performance. But maybe right now it's affecting the vice president more so than the president, and in part because, like you said, tama kayo. The public doesn't like these fights, and would just rather we focus on the problem at hand.
Yeah, the graphic that we're flashing right now whilst you were talking of the vice president distrust number. So it isn't just the fact that she's lost trust, it's also the fact that her distrust numbers are rising. So if you take a look at that, in NCR, it's plus 4 points from the last survey. Highest, there was a jump in Visayas. There was a increase of 11 points compared to second quarter. Typically, that strikes me as a bit strange, because she always strong in Visayas, and does that mean something to you?
Well, she's been strong in Visayas, but mainly, I think, based on the data that we see, she's mainly strong in the Visaya area. But the Visayas is composed of regions, and that includes the Ilonggos. And from what I'm seeing, the Ilonggos are. I mean, she's not really that strong right now with the Ilonggos, as far as I can see from the data, and also with the Eastern Visayans also. So I think she's maintaining her, let's call it her base in Mindanao and in parts of Visayas. But so the other parts of Visayas may have seen some decline in trust or an increase in distrust, and but maybe she's still holding on to the trust and performance in Mindanao and mainly, I believe, in Central Visayas.
But the landscape is shifting.
I was gonna ask you, like, is there kind of any signs that her Vis-Min numbers are showing that she's just solidifying her existing base there? Na matagal na naman nating alam that's already where she's strong.
Well, yeah, she's. I mean, it's fairly consistent. She hasn't lost a lot of ground in Mindanao. In fact, you could see that she enjoys a 1% distrust in Mindanao. But my observation here is, a lot of people in local areas, they also tune into local news, and the way local news is delivered may be different depending on the locality. So news could be framed differently in Mindanao and maybe in parts of Visayas. So that's how I see it. But of course, in the NCR, we frame news here in the same way. We frame it in TV5, so fairly consistent. But yeah, I wouldn't say that they're strengthening their base. I think their base is stable right now, but they're losing ground in NCR and Balas Luzon, from what I can see.
Given the most recent happenings with the former president in the Senate and also the recent press con of the vice president, medyo magkasalungat yun eh. Parang sinasabi nila, si former President Rodrigo Duterte medyo positive kasi nabigyan ng platform para mapakinggan sila. Pero kabaliktaran, dun na sa nangyari kay Vice President. How do you see that affecting the numbers in the next quarter, given how we know the population and how they perceive politics and how they want to focus on the work?
Well, it will be interesting to see what will happen, and it would be difficult to make the prediction at this time. But I mean, I won't say difficult or impossible, but right now there's like you mentioned, there's a difference between the former president Duterte's how he's handling the situation and the vice president how she's handling the situation. There's a difference in their messaging and in how they're delivering the messages. So it would be interesting, but based on the sentiment analysis that we're seeing, especially for the vice president, with the distribution of the positive and the negative responses to these recent events, we sort of have an idea of what the direction would be as far as her trust and performance for the next quarter. I can't claim that now, but we'll probably see na lang next quarter how it affects the numbers.
You keep saying that approval and performance ratings are all dynamic, that it could change at any time, and that people's sentiments could turn. But have you ever actually seen that happen for anyone, for them to come back in a major way?
I know, I was thinking, are we that fickle? Like it would take just one thing, one big thing, to change everything.
I think we're fickle, but you have a good point, Regina. I'm not sure if we've seen it, dramatically shift in direction, like an inflection. So usually they tend to, be more of stable or, changing slightly in a certain direction. For example, former President Duterte, he enjoyed high trust and performance ratings for about 4 to 5 good years, wherein he was in the 80s to 90s. It just started to decline in his 6th year, but that may have been caused by certain, additional events like COVID, etc., and the inflation that's already starting at that time. So, looking at historical data on trust and performance, even for other countries like U.S. presidents, it's difficult to find an example wherein there was a sudden change, that it changed reverted in a different direction. But again, we'll have to see. I mean, we can't say something is impossible because we haven't seen it yet. But so far, the history shows that trends have been moving in a certain direction. They will usually continue to move in that certain direction.
I'm sure it's going to be an uphill climb for her. We're going to have to leave that there for tonight. Thank you so much for helping us make sense of the numbers. That was Octa Research Fellow Professor Guido David.
Up next, Typhoon Leon, now called Kongray, is edging towards Taiwan, but not without wreaking significant havoc first in the Philippines. We check on its track when the big story returns. Keep it here. Welcome back. You're still watching Big Story here on One News. Typhoon Leon has now made landfall and begun wreaking havoc in Taiwan. They say it is the strongest storm to hit the island in 3 decades. Here in the Philippines, our affected kababayans in northern Luzon are struggling to return to their livelihoods. And the provincial government of Batanes has had to ask the national government for help in relief operations. Brian Basa has the report.
Howling winds woke up residents in Sabtang, Batanes as early as 6 in the morning. In Basco, incessant rains inundated villages. Despite the rough weather, authorities continued to work away and clear roads of mud and rock brought about by landslides. They also forced residents along the coastlines and landslide-prone areas to evacuate. Meanwhile, more than 100 tourists are still stranded in Batanes. It might take until the weekend before they could fly out because of the damage sustained by Basco and Itbayat airports.
Once na humina ito, lalabas na po kami para tingnan namin extent ng damage.
Governor Marilu Cayco guarantees Ivatans will have enough food supply, but communication lines are still choppy. No word either on when power will be restored. That's why they've asked for help from Defense Secretary Gilbert Teodoro.
So, ang hiling ko lang naman is kahit na 2 o 3 biyahe lang ng 130 para lang magdala ng family food pack para sa bawat pamilya po.
Meanwhile, in Apari, Cagayan, strong waves destroy this cottage, carrying out to sea. In Baggao town, raging flood waters swept rows of corn plants away. Farmers tried to save them, but their efforts were in vain as flood waters drowned the entire plantation. In Barangay Kasambalangan, Santa Ana town, 20-year-old fisherman Alexis looks on in vain. The storm has rendered him unable to fish for 1 week. But earlier today, the sun peeked out briefly, so Alexis decided to sail, even if the waves were still roaring.
Kaya ito lang nagkakita namin. Kapag wala ng laot, wala nang makain.
Turns out, fishing is the primary livelihood in Kasambalangan, and so all barangay officials could do was to caution fishermen like Alexis to not stray too far from the beach.
Iyon ang importante sa kanila na kailangan din sila kumita para sa pamilya nila. Okay. Pero ang ikaliligtas nila, yun din ang number 1.
Signal number 2 is still up in the town of Itbayat in Batanes, while other towns in the province are still under signal number 1, as well as over the northern portions of Cagayan and Ilocos Norte. At 5 in the afternoon, the eye of Typhoon Leon, international name Kong Ray, made landfall over southeastern Taiwan, the strongest storm to lash the island in 30 years. High winds and floods battered its eastern and northern areas, toppling trees and damaging houses. The Taiwanese capital Taipei is mostly shut down, with classes and work suspended and hundreds of flights cancelled. After crossing the Taiwan landmass, Typhoon Leon is forecast to turn northeastward over Taiwan Strait towards the East China Sea and finally exit the Philippine area of responsibility by tomorrow, All Saints' Day. For News 5, I'm Brian Basa, and we are One News.
That music was very, very much Halloween. And of course, it is the eve of All Saints' Day, and Pinoys have begun heading to cemeteries to visit their dead. While some cemeteries have imposed visiting hours, there are still some that allow visitors to stay overnight. The PNP has issued advisories on the do's and don'ts while visiting cemeteries nationwide. We have our mobile journalist, Merimon Reyes, joining us from the Manila North Cemetery. Merimon, first of all, 24 hours open rin ba ang Manila North?
Good evening, Gretchen, Rich, and Shawn. So far, sa new protocol ngayon, naging extended lang ang visiting hours here at the Manila North Cemetery. So that's from 5 a.m. to 5 p.m. But according to Manila Mayor Hani Lacuna, due to the influx of visitors, especially since the beginning of October 29 and expected to end by November 3, nag-request din ang karamihan na ma-extend ang ito. That's why na-extend siya ngayon from 5 a.m. to 7 o'clock p.m. And as of now, sarado na ang gate dito at bawal na ngang pumasok ang mga bibisita. According to the advance command post, 105,000 ang naging crowd estimate ng bumisita this day. And from this number, 1,100 plus naman yung minors na na-register at nabigyan ng name tag for safety purposes, just in case na meron sa kanilang maliligaw, meron ngayong safety net para makontak yung mga magulang o kaya naman ang guardian na kasama nila. They're also expecting na papatak again ng 1 million to potentially 1.5 million ang totality ng visitors here at the Manila North Cemetery from October 29 to November 3. And with that, over 12,000 NCRPO police ang deployed. Bumisita rin kanina dito si Major General Sidney Hernia at yun nga ang nasabi niya. Plus, over 20,000 yung naging total ng police na deployed nationwide to ensure the safety and security, hindi lang dito sa Manila North Cemetery, kundi sa lahat ng may kinalaman sa paggugunita ng undas. At the same time, meron ding libreng e-trike na nagbibigay din ng libreng sakay para sa senior citizens, persons with disabilities, buntis, and yung iba pang mga ngailangan ng transportation assistance. Kasi 54 hectares ang lawak nitong Manila North Cemetery. So that's about, lagpas siya ng 100 acres eh. So ganun siya kalayo kung lalakarin ito. So and sa labas din ng North Cemetery, meron ding mga e-trike na rumoronda para magbigay din ng transportation assistance. At libre ito, to note that one.
Sino naglilibre, Marimon? Sino nagbabayad ng free transport, yung sementeryo ba?
Provided ito ng lokal na pamahalaan ng Maynila. And so far, 40 dito, 40 sa labas ng Manila North Cemetery. And nakuha lang din natin ng impormasyon sa Manila South Cemetery, meron din dineploy na about 40 e-trikes din na nagbibigay ng libreng transportation. And to note din kung bakit merong e-trike sa labas ng Manila North Cemetery, kasi mayroon ding road closures around the cemetery that would include Aurora Boulevard from Dimasalang to Rizal Avenue, the length of Blumen Street from A. Bonifacio Road to Guevara Street, Retiro Street from Dimasalang to the Blumen Street Extension, sarado din yan. The length of Maceda from Makiling Street to Dimasalang Road, and the length of P. Guevara from Cavite Street to Aurora Boulevard. These roads are closed until November 3, 7 o'clock in the evening. However, meron namang alternative routes for our motorists, for those na pupunta sa La Loma at Chinese Cemetery, kasi bordering lang yan dito sa Manila North Cemetery, pwede naman daw dumaan sa may Rizal Avenue o Jose Abad Santos. Aside from that, isa rin sa naging obserbasyon natin bukod sa binigay na guidelines o protocols kung ano ba yung mga bawal na bitbitin sa loob, marami pa rin ang nakumpiska na binitbit. So ang rason dito, nung iba hindi nila alam na bawal ang mga ito, samantalang yung iba naman ay bitbit na lamang talaga nila ito at naabutan. And nasabi din ng PNP, yung confiscated items tulad na lamang ng mga, yung kanina, ang mga nakumpiska dito, perfumes with alcohol content, vape, cigarettes, even yung lighters, mga bawal ang mga iyan. Lahat naman daw ng mga ito ay pwedeng makolek or ma-retrieve sa November 3 and 4. Pero to note, in general, ang mga bawal pa rin na dalhin o bitbitin sa mga pampublikong cemetery or in every cemetery in general, mga baril o paputok, sharp objects or items, liquor, sigarilyo, lighter, gitara, maiingay na sound systems. Even yung fur babies natin o yung mga alaga natin, hindi rin pinapayagan na pumasok dito. Kaya meron din tayong ilang nakita na may bitbit silang mga alagang aso, hindi sila pinatuloy sa loob ng sementeryo. At kahit na anong posibleng makapagdulot ng aksidente o gulo, lahat ng ito ay prohibited. Pero so far, for this day, wala pang reported na cases of threats, cases of emergencies, injuries, especially na may nakastandby dito na over 10 medical personnel from the Manila MDRRMO, 2 from the Manila Health Department, and over 25 health personnel are deployed around the Manila North Cemetery from the Philippine Red Cross. And so far, we're expecting the influx of visitors by tomorrow, November 1 until November 3, kasi ngayon 105,000 pa lang. So this is quite a small number compared sa kung ano yung lagi nating naririnig when it comes to the tally of visitors around cemeteries, especially here in Manila North. Pero since tomorrow, November 1, and then long weekend din ang undas, inaasahan natin na baka mahabol nito yung 1.5 na tally as compared to last year. Balik sa inyo.
Marimon, okay. Halloween na Halloween ka. Okay yung ilaw mo Oo. Huwag ka matutulog dyan
Okay, maraming salamat sa update na yan. Hindi kami magdadala ng cologne sa sementeryo. Yun lang yung parang bago. I don't bring my dogs, but I always bring cologne. Okay, thanks so much for that update. Mobile journalist Marimon Reyes reporting to us live from outside the Manila North Cemetery, which is only open till 7 p.m.
Moving on now, more than a dozen Chinese nationals involved in cyber scamming were arrested at a raid in Parañaque. The NBI says they're a splinter group from the bigger pogos that have since been banned. Mon Gualvez has the details of that.
NBI operatives armed with search warrants rushed to this condominium unit in Parañaque City that's believed to be a scammers' hub.
Working station, oh. Okay, don't down.
Inside, some Chinese were caught in the act of live chatting with their victims.
Sit down. Hands up.
All in all, 17 Chinese were arrested in this operation. The NBI says they're a splinter group which broke away from the big pogos and that they're involved in cryptocurrency and love scams and online gambling.
From bawal na malalaking grupo, nag-splinter sila to small groups. Paunti-unti nag-o-occupy sila ng condo units or residential units in subdivisions para maituloy pa rin nila yung kanilang illegal activities.
In the middle of the operation, one of those arrested pretends to call a lawyer to ask for help allegedly from their big boss. They then proceed to bribe the NBI agents.
Itong isang boss ay nag-offer po ng 300,000 para po mapakawalan. So, para sa kanila po sa 17, they offered 5.1 million po. Pero dahil isa lang ang sasakyan nila, ang napag-usapan by batch po. So, for 5 persons po, that would be 1.5 million po.
The NBI used this opportunity to launch an entrapment operation. After the transaction, they arrested the Chinese who brought the money. He will be charged with corruption of public officials and falsification of public document. Meanwhile, the 17 Chinese caught in the condo unit will face violations of Cybercrime Prevention Act and Anti-Financial Account and Scamming Act. The NBI is now coordinating with the Bureau of Immigration to check on the legitimacy of their stay in the Philippines. For News 5, I'm Mon Gualvez. We are One News.
After this break, we will be speaking with George Royeca, ride-hailing app CEO, on why he wants to be a congressman. Keep it here on One News. You're back with us here on The Big Story, only on One News. Election time, so the Comelec has posted on its website the certificates of candidacy for 66 senatorial aspirants and the CONAS, or certificates of nomination and acceptance, for 156 party list groups. Now, this is the first time that the Comelec has done so, and it is aimed at preventing cases like that of Alice Go, who won public office despite allegedly having falsified documents. By uploading all the details, Comelec is hoping that the public will do their part and help scrutinize the COCs and CONAS of the candidates. Only the paperwork for senatorial aspirants and party list groups have been uploaded for now. The COCs will be posted later on. To access the files, visit the Comelec website at comelec.gov.ph, go to the Elections menu, and then click the 2025 National and Local Elections option. After that, on the right side, there is a content list section. Then click the redacted COC, CONA, and option.
Concan
option. There you will find information on your candidates, including residence and voter registration status. One caveat, though, about the information is that cases filed against these candidates are also supposed to be listed in their COCs, but the Comelec says some aspirants did not include present and past cases.
How convenient.
One of those 156 party list groups vying for Congress is Ang Kasangga, which vows to protect the rights of informal workers. Ang Kasangga's first nominee is George Royeca, CEO of ride-hailing app Angkas, and who now joins us to talk more about his candidacy. Welcome back to The Big Story.
Thank you for having me.
Well, this time not as CEO, but as a candidate in the midterm elections. I mean, to be honest, we were all surprised With this
Collecting your thoughts.
Ask it.
Regina, ask it.
Ask it.
My
Go.
question?
Yeah. Ask it.
As a CEO of Angkas, are you ready to represent?
Oh, no. The first question.
The first question is
why?
Okay, why? Hindi yun.
Why do you even want to run for Congress?
There's no emoticons on the why. It's just with a
There's
question mark.
3
Or
question marks after that.
Why go into
The
politics?
big red ones.
we've been working with our sector, the riding public, no, and of course yung kagulong na tinatawag namin. When we started Angkas 8 years ago, they were really considered informal workers without any rights, without any benefits. It was a long, arduous journey for us. And after 8 years, we were able to successfully make them part of the formal economy. But I think there's still a lot of these pockets of workers that are still left without a champion, right? They're still working every single day, paying VAT, paying taxes, but because of a classification issue, because of the lack of recognition, they're not really afforded any type of benefits versus other workers. So for me, this is such a, there's really a big opportunity to be able to, shine a light on this and really empower a lot of these individuals. There are about 17 million informal workers in the Philippines. If you were to put them and recognize them alongside the labor force, that they would make up 25% of the workforce. That's huge. And they work every single day, right? But then what we need to do is just what we did with the Angkas system. We just created a classification. We were able to recognize them. And now Angkas bikers enjoys the benefit of Social Security. They have pag-ibig, low-cost housing, and the opportunity to really change their lives for the better.
So
and
as
this is why
Congressman,
we are here.
that's what you would change? You would create a new classification?
Yes, that is going to be first on the agenda. Because everybody, as long as you're working, as long as you're contributing to the national economy, should not be discriminated on whether you're formal or informal. You should well, you're partaking in the economy, you're part of the system, but then when it comes to the benefits, you're afforded a different type of benefit, mostly dole-outs.
These would be for gig workers.
Yes.
Only.
Anyone who's
Only.
an informal. Yeah.
Well, because
So that's what-
informal workers also cover household help, for instance.
Correct.
Yeah.
So that's a separate
No, that's what I
classification
wanted
altogether.
to ask, actually, Rich. So if you think about Angkas, you might think this party list has something to do with the interests of the transportation sector. But we introduced you as the champion on the rights, or championing the rights of informal workers. So just to be clear, this Angkasangga is for informal workers, more than it is for transportation,
So look at
wellness.
it. So we're starting with our core sector, right? Which is the motorcycle owners. And people that actually, to be more specific, people that use motorcycles for livelihood, right? But the system that we've created, just in the private sector, with the help and in conjunction with government agencies, we created a system that allows empowerment for this type of business, for this type of negociantes, so to speak. But they're not employees. They're also not a company, but they're a negociante. They're essentially their own company with an employee of one. And this system, I strongly believe, if we're able to really create a good policy around it and a good framework, it could really empower more than just motorcycle negociantes or non-entrepreneurs. It can empower everybody that's, at this point in time, is really falling through the cracks. They're caught in the middle. They're neither here nor there. But they contribute to the national economy. And I think that's the opportunity. Right now, it's a tragedy. And I'm a startup entrepreneur. And us entrepreneurs, we really like looking at opportunities. And I think this is a problem that is very solvable. We have solved it with the Angkas system. And now we plan to do it to the rest of the country.
Gretchen has a burning question.
Let it burn.
What is the status of the TNVS law now in Congress? And what were your learnings lobbying for that for a long time?
Great, a lot of learnings. I've learned how to work within the system. I know exactly how it works in the Congress and in Senate. And I think that is a plus. That is a big advantage. I'm not coming in cold. I've been part of the system and working through the system for the last several years. And I think there's a lot of us that are able to really, for my sector, my guys are very, very smart. these workers, these nanopreneurs, they know their problems, they go through it every single day, but more importantly, they know the solution. This is why I'm running as a party list. I could run as me, but I'm not running as George Royeca. I'm running as Ang Kasangga.
Bakit hindi pa napapasa yung TNVS law?
Hopefully, it's gone through several evolutions from just a simple standalone, it's gone through several evolutions from just a amendment to the Republic Act 4136 to now a standalone law. So it took a while for us to look at, what's been happening, in the real world scenario of the pilot and how it should impact. In fact, that law still, needs a lot of work in the provisions for livelihood, right? Labor provisions, tax provisions, a lot of other economic provisions beyond pure safety
So
alone.
is that on top of your agenda?
Yes, it is.
If you're lucky enough
Well,
to
I
win,
really
if
hope
you
it
make
gets passed before that.
Yeah.
Right? Because we've
But
been
that
waiting
was-
for a long time. But
On the
but
burner-
but
yeah.
if that doesn't happen, that's definitely going to be the first on my list, among other things.
Okay,
There's
what
a lot of
other
first
things?
on my
So
list.
How would you fix a problem like the PUV modernization program, wherein both sides have a good point, right? It's one of those, in economics, there's always a trade-off or something,
Correct.
right? So on the one hand, the government wants to make them eco-friendly, wants to make the jeepneys eco-friendly and efficient, but on the other hand, the drivers also have a good point. They can't afford it. They don't want to consolidate into cooperatives.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people look at it as one or the other. It shouldn't be that way. Like in business, it's never that way. It's never like I win, you lose, therefore we have a deal. You got to make this deal win-win. Definitely the environment is at play here. It's a good thing for the environment, but also it should be a good thing for the people.
Correct.
And just looking at modernization, we did that. We modernize habal-habal. And no one's complaining. Everybody loves it from both sides, right? The government likes it, the public likes it, and the drivers are earning a very good living. We've uprooted 50,000 bikers out of the poverty line because of it.
Yeah. George, would it be safe to say that, like you said, you've been shepherding the bill, the amendment, which is now a standalone bill through, I think, 3 Congresses already?
Correct.
Would you say deciding to run for the benefit of informal workers and to stand for them was a result of frustration that you might have experienced throughout that process?
I mean, I think there's frustration, in every endeavor, right? It's always been a challenge. And I think I can add value when I'm there. Add even more value because I understand how things work and I can bring in the outside, essentially the outside perspective. And this is the perspective of the people that are actually working every single day. Me, I stand on the back of millions of informal workers and they're my constituency. And I've seen how their lives have changed, from being jobless, unemployed, or just doing rackets here and there to now having a stable profession, a career, right? And being able to really take advantage of the government benefits. And if you really look at it, there's only 3 things. One is recognition, right? Just pure recognition. Be putting dignity to that profession, recognizing that. Number 2, that opens it up to more benefits. Government mandated benefits, do them because when you pay taxes, it is your right to actually get back what you pay for, right? Tenfold because
And
the government manages it for you.
And the burden of paying the benefits would fall on the operator?
No, it will fall on both. The operator will provide the scenario. They're the accredited platform. They provide so many things from marketing, from technology. It's a marketplace. But also, the bikers don't need additional dole-outs like that. They actually have the ability to take care of themselves.
Yep.
The problem is there are many of our bikers that actually want to do that. But they can't. There's no facility for it.
So paano yung hulog? Diretso na.
Diretso na. Diretso
And they
na.
don't have, the drivers, the riders don't have to worry about giving monthly dues.
Correct. The whole concept of yung hulog, diba? If you look at it from an employee standpoint, regular yung kita mo eh. Pero for gig economy workers, hindi siya regular. Right? But the way it's structured right now, it's really focused on how do you create that ecosystem or that infrastructure around employees. So, I'll give you certain examples. What if hindi ko kaya maghulog kada buwan? Dapat may benepisyo pa rin ako. Diba? What if bakit kailangan ko maghulog ng a certain period of time? right? If I just need smaller benefits. So we need to tailor fit these things, and we have done in the past. You know, we started with corporations and employees. That was a good financial model, good banking system. Then after that, we looked at SMEs. We saw 99% of corporations were SMEs. So we created a law for SMEs. They register in DTI. They don't register in SEC. SME lenders are not registered under BSP. They are regulators, the SEC. It's a completely different ecosystem. This requires a completely different ecosystem. Informal workers have a different situation. They're fraught with different conditions.
Where else do you see that applying, apart
Everywhere.
from the TNBS world?
And I was asking, do you think you can apply that system that you have been describing to other sectors?
Of course. Any type of gig economy worker that is an employee of themselves, that relies on themselves, that does not have a boss, that owns their own time, should be able to get benefits from the government in a stable fashion as long as they continue to contribute,
The
which they
self-employed.
do.
But isn't that happening now? Like, for example, I'm a gig worker, kailangan maghulog ako, responsibilidad ko maghulog ako.
Yeah, but it's not just about the hulog eh. It's about anong nakukuha mo dun sa hulog. What are the implementing rules and regulation? What is the charter? What's the limitation? How can I tailor fit it
Maybe
for
you should look into PhilHealth.
We look into everything.
If you become congressman, that's certainly going to be your problem.
That's why you need to be in Congress, because this is policy making.
Yes.
You're creating this ecosystem around the completely new classification for workers that have been left, that have been invisible essentially.
Yeah, it's a great idea, but you know, in Congress, you are just one voice amongst 300 and what is the
300 plus, 310-ish.
300 and something other voices, right? And as evidenced by the TNVS law, which Gretchen brought up, sometimes things take a while to make happen, right? So what's going to be your strategy going in?
Well, I can wait until hell freezes over. We will push and keep pushing until it happens. You know, when did a majority ever push change, right? A lot of the big changes in the world, innovators, were done by a few people. Angkas, when we started, it started with a handful of people. But we created an entire industry around it. Now it benefits tens and thousands of Filipinos.
Yeah.
I believe in small people making big changes.
That's a corporate world. That's a startup world. Congress works differently.
It's reality. It's the world. Right? I may be naive, right? I may be idealistic, but I believe in the Filipino people. I believe in numbers, and we have numbers. There are 17 million informal workers, 18 million motorcycle owners.
Have they pledged to vote for Angkasangga?
Maybe you can ask them.
But I want to ask you this. Gretchen was, I think, we were circling back to the burning question, and I think we were all thinking this. Are you also going to stand for, your competitors' riders?
Of course. You know why? Because it has to be an industry stance, right? It has to be an industry stance.
Do you encourage more competition, more players to come in?
Of course. There will be regional players, local players, national players, just like in any business. I don't understand this concept of zero-sum. There's no such thing. Give me one industry that's zero-sum. There's none. You cannot do it that way. It can be win or lose. There is a way for everybody to benefit, and there's more people that are focused in this, more people that are looking at it, instead of me just shouting before on the top of my lungs on how we want regulation. Now that there are other people there, then they can help make these changes, affect these changes. And I've always believed in that industry stance, but we got to work together. It's all about working together. And this is one of the reasons why we're running. And, I'm running, simply put. We've changed things in the past from the outside. We've done it. All we're going to do now, it's not all we're going to do now, but, we have proven that the model works. We want to institutionalize this. We believe that there's more Filipinos, millions of them, that can be afforded this opportunity. And that's what I'm setting out to do. Regardless of company, regardless of competition, it is for not just the industry, but for the Filipino people, which they deserve.
Media workers will love you.
Of course. Cameramen.
Gotta get our benefits.
Right?
What's going to happen to Angkas if you win a seat?
It's going to go on. There's a lot of...
Who's going to take your place?
There's a lot of great people. You know who my real boss is there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of great people in Angkas.
former Manila Mayor Isko Moreno has endorsed your candidacy. How do you plan to campaign? Are you going to go with him? Have you plotted it out?
Also, I heard Vice.
Anong kampanya?
Vice ganda.
Vice ganda.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yun yung strategy.
You know, there's a lot of people that really support our cause, and I'm very, very thankful for them. You know, these guys, they know the constituency well, and they've realized that this can really, really put pockets in every Filipino, put money in the pockets of every Filipino, and really empower their lives, change it for the better. And you know, I'm very, very thankful for their endorsement, and you know, I hope that we can make good things and change things together. I'm very, very excited to work with Vice, to work with Yorme, in making these changes.
So mag-ano ka rin, motovlog? May ganun ba kami asahan sa'yo?
Pwede rin. Basta
ano
samahan
ngayon,
mo ako.
Sa TikTok.
Are we gonna do this, Gretchen?
Baka pagawa sa kanya eh.
Wait, just very quickly,
niya
last
sa likod
question. What happened to Angkars?
It's launched.
Oh, it's launched.
It's
Okay,
launched.
there is Angkars.
There is Angkars.
Okay.
There is Angkars.
I haven't seen.
But you know that
much.
isang daan at pitong kaarawan na ng saligang batas natin, right?
107th birthday of our Constitution.
Yes, it is.
Today,
Yeah.
on Halloween.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for reminding us. We've been a 2 sugar high the whole day.
That was a joke. That's the number. That's the number of
I was gonna
Angkasanda.
ask, what is your number in the
magaling
raffle?
ka.
107.
Yun yung po-
107.
Okay,
Kilala niyo po
got
si
it.
James Bond, di ba? Ito po yung anak sa labas ni James Bond.
Okay. So you drew 107. That's pretty far down. No?
May number na pala sa balot.
Nag-work din ng jokes.
Wait.
Oo, pero dapat medyo hindi corny.
Medyo.
I didn't
Pero natawa ka.
Alright, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And coming back to the big story, ang kasangga, first nominee and CEO of ride-hailing app Angkas, George Royeca.
And we have run out of time. That's it for the big story tonight.
We are One News, all sides, all the time. Happy Halloween.
Thanks for tuning in. Have a good night. Happy last day of October.